enforce this, and until something changes.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our January 27th, 2025, 9 a.m. strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that we have 4 commissioners in the conference room: Commissioner Kearns, French, Waldrop, and myself. And Commissioner Jordan is joining us by Zoom, and he just joined us. So we have going to start with our discussion on Shrek. So Cody, thanks for coming back. When we talked on Tuesday, we didn't have quite enough time to finish the discussion, and so we wanted to have you back and have more conversations. So thank you for taking time to do that. I know you're busy, and Sheriff Knowles, you're busy as well. So we appreciate you doing that. So I will go ahead and I think we kind of left off with just, we discussed kind of the bill in the morning with Mike Burgess that was dropped. We discussed with you kind of what the board at Shrek was thinking about and why they made the decision they made. And I think there's potentially some more questions, but since then we've also gotten a letter from the mayor. So I don't know where we want to start.
I'm happy to take this in whichever direction the board would like, but I do think that was a great summary. We went through the history of where we started, how we got to this point, and I think we concluded around what I felt were the 2 primary reasons the board took action to stop the transitional meetings and not move forward. And those were related to, 1, a proposal to maintain what's referred to as the status quo, which is essentially this hybrid model where city fire department is a member agency, SPD is not, and to maintain that status quo for another year. And then we also talked about the second reason that I think was also the big driver is House Bill 12. So happy to talk about both those. I still see just in a lot of circles maybe some missing context for House Bill 1258. So I pulled it up this morning and I wanted to go through some things that I think would be really important from an awareness standpoint. And one being the context of the bill, because in a lot of my discussions, I see folks envisioning this bill related to City of Spokane being their own dispatch center. This bill is not written from that context. The bill is written from what we refer to as the status quo, so current circumstances. And so what I would point out, I highlighted some language, but the following language relevant to that: receiving tax revenues under this chapter that operates a regional 911 emergency communication system that transfers emergency calls to a municipal 911 emergency communication system operator in a city. So this is all about the call still coming into the county and then being transferred to a separate facility. So it's not a separate dispatch center. It's still a county facility or what?
It's not a primary PSEP. It's a secondary PSEP in the language of the bill.
Yes. Right. So that's really important that it's written after that. Because when I look at the bill on the surface, I think, well, this is about fair and equitable apportionment. And I would tell this group that I fully support fair and equitable apportionment for the city of Spokane. As this bill is written, it's not fair and equitable. This bill still has all the work that is currently occurring, continuing to happen, and then additionally having apportionment on top of that. And so it's important to understand with the 911 excise tax, how those taxes are generated. I think this group understands that the 911 excise tax is different than the 1/10 of 1% sales tax, where you could look at 1/10 of 1% and make a case. I think you make a case for tax origination or population, where when you look at the 911 excise tax, it's tied to your phone and your phone bill, right? So tied to an address. This bill proposes collection or apportionment based on the call volume rather than where those taxes are coming for, or in that disproportionately benefits the city at the expense of the region. And so one, you have the current work still occurring, so that body of work and the cost of that work. And then two, you have it disproportionately benefiting the city, given what they generate compared to what they use. So almost what a lot of folks would refer to as double dipping. And so to try and tease this out, it's a bit challenging because the system has not been designed this way historically with apportionment. We've had the three funding buckets that I talked about last time. The 911 excise tax, the 0.1% sales tax, and the remainder made up of user fees. We've never apportioned the first two, the 911 and the 0.1, up until this point. And so those funds have all gone in the same pool, and we've used the most restrictive first to cover the initial costs of dispatching, so on and so forth. So 911 first, then applied the 0.1%, and then our user fees made up the difference. The numbers I had SREC go back and do okay, let's say based on system usage from 2020 to 2024, let's apportion those dollars based on system usage, and let's do it at population for 911. So 42% for City of Spokane for 911, and then give the benefit of doubt and what we call the high water mark, which would still need to be determined, but tax origination, 48% for 0.1% sales tax, and compare tax generation versus actual cost of services that have been provided to the City of Spokane, because I think there's a couple different perspectives as to who contributes more, who contributes less. When we go back for the period from 2024 or 2020 through 2024, and we apportion those tax dollars, so all the revenue that city would have generated compared to the services that they've received, the other members have paid over 3.26 million on behalf of the city, given that they spend down the 911 and the 0.1 faster than any other agency. We've just never looked at it. So I would point this out as far as who had the most to benefit from the regional system. The city by far had the most to benefit because they spend down based on usage. These are, actual numbers. They have more 911 calls. They have more crime check calls. And you would say
Radios, more.
all of that. And you'd say, well, that makes sense because of population. And I said, well, it's even more so. They disproportionately use more of that service above population. And so that's at the expense of the rest of the region. Under regional system, I think all our 20 other member agencies we're okay just saying, hey, that we're regional, that's a benefit. But when you start talking apportionment and pulling those dollars out, it's okay, we need to account for all those costs. And it's easy for this to become, well, I like that number and I don't like this number, almost like buying a car where here's the financing, here's your trade-in value, here's incentives, here's what you're going to get for insurance. At some point you go, time out. What do I need to write in my checkbook to take this vehicle home? And I think that's the cleanest way to look at this bill, as well as the latest letter from City of Spokane requesting 15 million, I believe is the number for 0.1% of 1%. I believe that was House Bill 1155 that did pass. But what I would say is those services have been provided already on behalf of the city with the application of those funds. So any sort of, and again, this letter is addressed to the county, but this would be my opinion, would be okay, happy to apportion those dollars, but they should also include a bill for the services that have been already provided using those dollars. And when we look at 2020 to 2024, city has been provided in excess over, it's 3.26, I believe is the number.
Is what was paid out in services in excess of what was collected or their tax revenue.
3.267 million.
Okay.
Compared to tax generation or to services provided. And so again,
They're in a deficit. The city would be in a deficit of 3.2 million.
And in addition, the city is paying their own dispatchers for lease in addition to all these other services.
yeah, and so the bill itself, right, is not as the city being their own primary PSAP, it's as current status quo, and that body of work. Spokane Regional Emergency Communications currently doing 100% of the work for fire. And then they're doing all of the call intake. They're doing the CAD entry. They're packaging that call and then shipping it to the secondary PSAP for SPD only. If you talk, not SREC's opinion, if you talk to the state 911 office, as far as the body of work for that 911 excise tax dollars, it's from call maker to call taker. And that work that SREC has already completed on behalf of SPD is 100% of the body of work that those 911 dollars were intended for. So this bill proposes to have SREC do all that work and then on top of it, seek apportionment. And that's why this was a big driver for the board to end the transitional meetings and allow them. The board, I would say, has been supportive the entire time for apportioning those tax dollars. They just want it to be fair and equitable. They do not believe just because a certain jurisdiction has more calls that they should get more of those dollars at the expense of the other agencies who generated those dollars. So that's the rub. They view it as almost the work still occurring and then seeking apportionment and then not seeking apportionment equitably. So a double dipping scenario with inequitable apportionment. And that's why that was a really big driver for the board to say, let's stop transition.
Well, and I will say one of the authors or one of the primary authors of the bill, Natasha Hill, she said it in the paper. The county should take care of the citizens of the city, right? It's their intent for this bill to suck tax dollars out of the county and I should say everywhere outside of the city of Spokane and bring those tax dollars in to do the city's work. He's very clear.
And I think as a regional partner, when we were all in the same system, 20 other member agencies understood that that's part of being regional. Sometimes I know sheriff needed radios or something for a helicopter that were more expensive than regular radios. And we looked at that and said, hey, that's good for the region. So there is some give and take, but you don't get the benefits of the regional system if you're not a regional partner. And so this is a case of wanting all the benefits and the economy of scale of, call it, group buying power without being part of the group. And so for the 20 other agencies, hey, if you do want to apportion, then we're going to have to account for all the services provided on your behalf. So it's going to be tax generation compared to system usage. And when we look at the actual numbers, they use more than they provide.
I'm just going to clarify one thing on the 15 million. You said how much was when you guys looked at the cost, how much additional cost was there? 3.6 or 3.2?
3.267. So for the period of 2020 through 2024, we went back and we looked at actual system usage for 911 emergency call receiving, prime check call receiving, radio services, and equipment. So we looked at the actual numbers, knowing the numbers from 2020 to 24, and then we apportioned the 911 and 1/10 tax dollars. We apportioned those dollars, and we said, okay, how much in services, right, were utilized? What was the cost of that? How much revenue was generated? That delta is 3.26 million that the city would owe.
Thank you, Commissioner French.
And just know with the passage of 1258, that delta for us gets even bigger, right? It then switches that 3.26. They still might be in a deficit depending on how it's apportioned, but now we're the ones who are going to end up being in the deficit if 1258 passes.
User fees to increase.
Yeah, so then do we back bill, right, for the 911 services that are already occurring on city's behalf? And we know that historically has not worked well, given the relationship of them owing. And so that's part of the challenge. And then why even have the bill? And what I would point to is why targeted legislation, if this bill really made sense, why is it very specific to just Spokane County?
Well, and here's why it is. We all know that, an additional 3.26 million that's gonna be problematic for the city, but them going to their own primary PSAP, we know that that delta for them being able to provide entire services adds another 15 to 20 million on startup. So of course, the mayor is going to look out for what's best for her citizens, but it's gonna come at the expense of all of the other citizens in Spokane County. So I think the mayor's being very truthful when she says, I'm just doing what's best for my taxpayers. Well, of course it is. But she certainly isn't doing what's best for the rest of the taxpayers in Spokane County, to include other jurisdictions like the city of Spokane Valley, Cheney, Medical Lake, Deer Park. She is not seeking to do what's best for them. In fact, quite the other way around. The citizens of Spokane will benefit at the detriment of other taxpayers in Spokane County.
So it was suggested to me last week that one of the reasons for the high call volume for the city of Spokane compared to the other jurisdictions is because the city has underfunded the police department and they don't have as many officers per 1,000, 10,000, whatever on the street that other jurisdictions have. And so where you might call in the city of the Valley and get a police officer to show up, you might end up having 2 or 3 or 4 people call for that same police officer to respond to a crime. Is there any legitimacy to that observation or not?
Could a scenario like that happen and be true? Yes. I would say we would need to be very careful about saying that understaffing police is a cause for higher crime or anything like that, because let's face it, our officers per thousand is even lower than the city of Spokane's, and we don't have the same crime rate. You can argue, is it policy? Is it lack of a confinement facility that affects us all region wide? There are all sorts of things, is it policy that they don't respond to certain crimes that is causing this? Is it, the way their municipal courts work? Is it the ineffectiveness of some of the diversion courts and things like that, community court? It's probably a little bit of all of them. So I would say we would have to be cautious saying it is this one thing, because the reality of it is we suffer from the same low staffing ratios, but don't have quite the crime rate that the city does. Is that just the nature of densely populated populations? I'm sure that has some of it. Does it have to do the socioeconomic status of the larger makeup of a group? That could be some of it too. But what I will say is we have the luxury of sending people to calls that the city doesn't. Just by policy, I say these are calls that we will respond in person to, and the city doesn't do that, and that's a choice they make. Now, is it because they need more people on the street? I will tell you, ratio wise, at least a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, the city had about 30% higher call volume than we did countywide, but they also had 30% more of the officers than we did. Their ratios were a little bit better. Obviously, there's more people living outside the city of Spokane than live in it, and they have about 75 to 100 more officers than we do at any given time. So,
Okay, thank you.
That's a really long, convoluted answer, Commissioner. That's just like it could be, but there's a lot that plays into that.
Yeah, just trying to fact check. Yeah.
And then Commissioner Waldron last Monday had made the comment on medical service calls. And so I was curious, do you know, like with the city of Spokane, kind of what's medical versus what's police? And
Typically, most agencies run from 75 to low 80s for overall for fire, a proportion of fire calls, right? Those medical calls. Guessing they're probably in that upper 70s to get the actual number for us.
But fire, I mean, for the city of Spokane, fire to police, that would be the interesting
But
way to.
Yeah, I was just referring to like fire EMS calls.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's more calls on the police side than I don't
Yes.
know.
Traditionally, we have shown, and that's, city of Spokane and even, everybody outside the city of Spokane, the police respond to far more calls for service than fire does. I mean, it's almost 2 to 1. I think in our last report, it was almost 2 to 1, wasn't it?
Yeah, and this is a good question, because I was trying to look at,
But I do think
user
a majority were medical calls, by the way, for
Yeah.
fire.
user fee methodology and how we apply user fees right now under what's currently this hybrid or status quo model. The remainder, right? So the remainder balance that's paid with user fees is split between law and fire. And it's a 55-45 split current. Used to be 60 law, 40 fire, but when SFD, Spokane Fire Department, came over, we changed it to 55-45. So 55 law, 45 fire. What's interesting is the cost per call for law enforcement, $18.57, okay, so about $19. And the cost per call for fire, about $46.50, right? So significantly more given the number of resources that we move on a fire call.
Yeah.
So interesting things within that, and I was trying to go to, hey, what is the split? We've got the split regionally between law and fire, but I'd like to look even further into the city of Spokane and see what those numbers are. Because currently 100% of the work is occurring for Spokane Fire Department. We know those calls cost significantly, almost 3 times as much. And we know that all this call packaging, the call intake, the data entry into CAD, that's all occurring on behalf of SHREC for the city. They're getting that, and they're really beginning triage on the call by the time they receive it.
But in a perfect world, and what might affect that dollar amount for law services is, we had come to I think we were pretty close on a service level agreement with the city, and for their police services, and they use their dispatchers in a far different way than we do on the county side. They have their dispatchers far more involved, and so it takes more dispatchers, it takes more time for them to dispatch a call. So I think if the city comes in, that rate probably increases. Because there's a little bit more hands-on time, a little more dispatch work done on their side for their people. Which is fine, and I think they have every right, probably should ask for that higher level of service, because that's the way they tend to manage some of their resources. They do that at the dispatch level where we don't. I want my sergeants making those decisions on when people are dispatched to what kind of calls and making decisions, but they allow their dispatchers to do some of that. And then I'm not saying one way's right, one way's wrong, but they do demand more of their law dispatchers than we do. So it will end up costing more money and requiring more bodies to provide that service to them if they were to come into SHREC.
That was one of the 3 primary topics that I did feel we
did
were
get to,
making
but-
progress. Governance and finances, we really didn't make progress on with the SLA. And so we had a potential scenario where we may have had different service levels between law enforcement agencies. That's solvable, right? We can look at that body of work and then go, okay, should there be a different cost for that? So I did feel like that was the area we were making progress on.
Yeah, in fact, I think we were just waiting for Chief Paul to say, yes, this document says everything we want it to say.
Well, just to follow up on that, I think that was a huge win. So I just wanted to say that in those 2 months of intensive meetings, that's a big step to get to that potential. I guess it wasn't signed off on yet by the city, but there was.
I think we were gonna get there no matter what.
On the service agreement, because I think that's been, as from my understanding, the sticking point from the city law side was we have a different expectation of the dispatcher's time and energy to work with the officers when they dispatch that call. So I just want to comment that was like good progress.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, like, what will it take to get folks back to the table to move on those last couple issues? Did the city in its letter say that they did not want to continue coming to terms around a common agreement with bringing law on board?
Yeah, they continue to verbalize that they want to do that. So when I really tried to distill down why did the board take action, I do believe it was for 2 primary reasons. So they say they want to do this. There's been very, very clear discussion around forward momentum and getting out of the status quo current circumstances. So the letter, the last response received on January 10th proposed maintaining the status quo for another year. So if we were making progress and we we're close on those items, why another year? And then simultaneously, same day, House Bill 1258 dropped. And so from the perspective of the board, there was the actions of the city of Spokane were much different than what was conveyed in the letter. So to your question, which is a good question, and I'm trying to summarize.
Don't forget the expenditures that were coming up in this year that would have been untenable.
They did agree
Status quo.
to join the CAD, right?
Correct. They expressed a desire to
Okay.
join the CAD. That created a discussion. Is that as a regional partner? Or is
Right.
that as your own entity? And to the sheriff's point, very importantly, here's why status quo, because you can just say, well, why not? Why not status quo? Well, for the board, it's been 3 administrations, 6 years, and 3 major projects. So one, the new facility and the retrofit of new facility. RFQ is going out literally in the next 1 to 2 months. The ability, right, to make those needed retrofits based on who is going to be there, right? The uncertainty around is City of Spokane part of this new regional center, or are they not? Because we're going to start making investments, right, on behalf of the region, knowing whether or not they're there significantly affects the cost. So that was one of the major ones. The other big one was CAD. So we've always advocated from the SREC board's position that, hey, it'd be best if we're all on the same CAD. That had been a rocky road because there'd been a verbal commitment from the city that they're in. We're going to split the cost 50-50. They don't deny that. But then reversed position over the last year and say, hey, we're not. And SREC was left with the $5 million bill for CAD. And then this movement, hey, we're back in. Okay, we think this is a good thing. For context is really important here. There had been discussion, never a formal vote. Hey, if city just joins, are we just going to say, hey, you get that $2.5 million, you're not getting a bill for that? You'd be coming in as a regional partner. I think that's what the board would have done if they said we're all in. They would have said, okay, that's a benefit of being regional. So that creates the question of, you're all in on CAD, that's your expressed intent. Is that as a regional partner, or is that maintaining the status quo? And so when we see the status quo proposal, that indicates, no, that's not as a regional partner. And so if we're making progress in transition meetings, why are we proposing the status quo? And if we're making progress in those meetings to become regional, why is there a House bill dropping for apportionment? And it's based on current circumstances. So those 2 things I think were the really big.
Well, and I will add that we told the mayor, and I know some of that came from members of the board, that composition was never up for negotiation. And that was maybe the one thing that they brought up in every single meeting was board composition, no matter how many times we told them board composition was not negotiable.
But we would add the police.
We would add the police chief, right, but we were not going to give the city voting control of the board. Because we understood that they wanted to, and the mayor's representative, Maggie Yates, said in several of our board meetings that, well, we shouldn't be charging any user fees. We can draw down that the fund balance, the reserve fund balance, which we had planned to use to pay for CAD, to build a building, to do some of these things. And in fact said, well, we should, some debt is good. We can do that too. So it was very clear that in these negotiations, if she couldn't get control of the board, which she never stopped asking for, the mayor. She then said, well, then maybe we need to have some kind of a board that oversees finances, right? That was amenable to her, which showed that this was about money for them. They wanted to improve the city's bottom line. So it was even less expensive for them to be part of this system, which means it would be more expensive for the rest of us and would put us in a financially precarious position. And when we didn't budge on any of those things, they didn't agree to anything. Those were 2 topics that they were just never going to lay off.
All right, I just wanted to clarify. So the city was requesting a majority vote
They kept saying 58%. We're
the
58% of the car volume, we should have 58% of the board.
Okay, I thought it was adding 2 more board members
No.
instead of 1.
Yeah, she wanted
Okay,
a whole governance committee of elected officials that would then oversee the finances that had a majority. I think that was the proposal that had the majority. So that they would oversee the finances. And that's why the governance and the finance really are, I mean, we have to let this board run the finances because they know what they're doing. And that's why we wanted politics out of it, because it's like, it's they're gonna have to accept what the level of service is, and they know what that is. I don't know what that is as a commissioner. They know what budgets are gonna be, and so they're gonna make adjustments if we don't have any more money to keep paying for higher user fees. They've got to figure out what that looks like. So we wanted all of that to stay with Shrek, are the people that really know what they're doing and know what those level of service is, because budget affects the level of service. So that's why governance, we add the other member, so the city would have 3 out of 10, right, with 1.
That would take total to 10 voting members plus the citizen, not voting citizen.
So they would have 3, and finance would stay with the board. And we'll stay with the board. I mean, I don't think, again, they're making financial decisions that we shouldn't be making, because they're trying to make it based on what they know for the citizens and for the call volumes and for the level of service. And then the third thing was the level of service agreement with the city of Spokane on the police. And I think if we came together in a few weeks, we could get there and get them to come over if they agreed to adding the police chief and letting Shrek manage the finances.
well, what I'm hearing, yeah, and so I just, this whole idea of apportionment, it's just so messy and trying to figure it out. So I almost hear you, Corey, like kind of talking about give and take, like with the half of the CAD cost,
Yeah.
right? And like, where could we have some give and take and like figuring out what's fair? So I just wonder if there's any opportunity to have someone like a mediator come in and just see if you can have a couple more meetings within a certain time frame where that person doesn't have any kind of, bias and is just listening and trying to bring the parties together to, I just, then the bill can go away. We don't have to, it would just be great if we could come up with something local and not have, stuff dictated to us. So that's just my hope, suggestion.
Commissioner French and then Commissioner Kurtz.
So I'm really confused. If you have a system that's working, why would you want to compromise it to something less than that? I mean, I'm really having a disconnect with, you have a system that's doing everything we wanted it to do, everything we assured that the voters it would do. Why would you compromise that for something for one organization? I don't understand that.
I think that's, when we look at the 20 other member agencies, that is their position to the point of the discussion around governance. They look at the current circumstances, they go, the governance is working exactly as intended. It was by design. And again, a consultant was brought in, city was at the table when the initial governance was created, and they agreed and supported to that.
Yep.
And it was to try to prevent public safety from being politicized, try to avoid some of the waves around different election cycles, try to be blind to, partisan politics. And so I think everybody looks at it now and they go, it is working for governance. And I do think the board's always been willing to have reasonable conversation, but they also look like the word mediation or mediator. That's where they've drawn the line and say, hey, look, we're not forcing them to be here. Here's what's working for the 20 other member agencies. Because then what gets lost in this is where the other 20 member agencies are. If we were to fold or give on governance, some of the other agencies have already expressed that, hey, we're out, right? If it becomes control by the city, if that's what happens, we're gone. And so that's where I think I agree with everything you had to say, Commissioner, other than having a mediator, but certainly fair and equitable apportionment if they want, or willing to work with them to be part of the regional regional assistant.
Yeah, I did cross that. Got
So Commissioner Jordan has his hand. up.
Yeah, so
No, I got Commissioner Kearns and then Commissioner Jordan.
and I apologize, I've got to go. The last thing you want you to do is to do what STA did, forced to do through the state legislature. And that board has become dysfunctional because of the imbalance of the representation on the board, and it has no correlation to revenue or anything else. But it's the most embarrassing board I sit on and stuff. So whatever you do, don't follow that model. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kearns and then Commissioner Jordan.
I was just gonna ask for a clarification. Commissioner Waldron, you said if we brought in a mediator to try to come to an agreement, you said then the bill would go away. Did Representatives Hill and Ormsby say that they would hold that bill if we
No,
had a
I'm just saying,
mediator?
like, there's no, whatever happens, it's not, if there's an agreement amongst the local governments here about how they're gonna do the services and share the money, then it doesn't really matter what Olympia does. So
Unless
that's
it's-
just what I'm saying.
Okay,
Well,
I mean, it would come to an agreement between the, the local agencies here.
here's, and I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for all the other board members, but here would be my concern with mediation is what's the point of going to mediation where we're not willing to budge on the things that they want us to budge on for reasons of, we don't trust them to come in and take control. And I don't think they're going to agree to anything less than them getting a larger control of the finances of that board, which there are members, the other 20 agencies that will not stand for that. And I'm here to tell you that the city of Spokane Valley has absolute serious concern about the city of Spokane getting any more representation or any more control, and you will see them make requests of the board, and this turns this whole thing into a free-for-all. I know Spokane Valley Fire Department has significant concerns from their elected commissioners about the city of Spokane getting any measure of control over the finances of the group. They just don't want to do it. So if that's the way people are, like, what good is mediation gonna do?
So, Commissioner Jordan.
I was just going to say I agree with Commissioner Waldriff. I understand. It looks to me like there's a window of opportunity here. I understand that the bill caused some strong feelings being proposed, but it's not been passed at this time. And the legislature, the session is not over. And so at this point, it's a hypothetical. It's a possibility that may come. And so there's a window of opportunity to say, perhaps we don't want a year of status quo. I hear you on that, but I'm also hearing everybody, I believe, unless I'm missing something, still say that regionalization makes sense. And regionalization is something that works best for the entire citizenry throughout the county. And so I'm also hearing, I think, from the mayor's letters, a desire to join with fire and police. And so it's just a matter of the terms. And I hear you that the terms are very important. And there's a lot of complication there. There's a lot of different perspectives with so many agencies. But it seems to me that rejecting a mediator out of hand is missing a potential opportunity to continue working until there's no more work to be done. And it seems to me that someone who doesn't quite have the personal or the strong feelings about all the history and the negotiation, like a retired judge, might be someone useful to come in, sending information back and forth, helping the other side understand your position, helping you understand their position. I just think that could be useful. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But why not try it? It would be my view.
Thank you for that. So we also have the letter from the mayor on the $15 million that she's given us until February 6th to provide those funds, or it goes to Superior Court. So I look at February 6th would be the date that, again, this is where I'm in agreement with Shrek, in that I don't think a mediator is going to help. It's it's coming down to, again, governance, we would add the police chief. Finance is strictly with the board, with the Shrek board. And the level of service, I think we can get to an agreement there and meet what their needs would be. And we could do that fairly quickly, because I think we were pretty much almost there. And if we could do that by February 6th, I think that would meet Shrek's deadline. I'm just saying this out loud. You can correct me because I don't want to, I'm not speaking for the Shrek board. But that could meet the deadline for, you know, the additional expenses that we're going to be, Shrek is incurring with the city not in. Versus the city in, because you guys have to have certainty to that as things are going. I think, so those are the three things that I think if we could figure that out by February 6th. Maybe it doesn't go to Superior Court, because I'm happy to have the letter go to Superior Court. Because then we can show the expense side of that equation. Which is not in the letter that came to us. So I think I'd be hopeful that maybe there could be some movement that way to make that happen. And be a regional system, because we do all know it's better to be a regional system. One of the things that, you know, with the representative's comment in the paper, and I think Amber, when you talked about, or Commissioner Waldron, I'm sorry, when you talked about, you know, the calls in the city of Spokane may be higher because people from outside the city of Spokane are coming in and are having medical issues. They're coming in and they're spending their dollars though, which the city wants them to, for going to a concert, going to restaurants, doing all those things. And so they're getting a higher percentage of sales tax revenue from that. That is part of what, you know, feeds the whole system, not just the 911 system or the 110 money. So I mean, so that's where some of those arguments, I know you can say it, and then when you really think about it and think of the you know, the benefits that the city is getting from having all those people come in versus the few, you know, the calls that are happening for citizens outside. So I'm hopeful that maybe we can have another discussion with the mayor and see if we can get to that, you know, the level of service agreement to bring police in.
Yeah, I think good summary by all there, because I carry the intent of the board. That's my job here as an individual board member, but trying to carry their intent. And I do agree with Sheriff that the governance and finances, right, are non-negotiables for the other 20 agencies represented by Shrek. And what we've asked is, okay, what would you change, right, if governance was different? And the one item is related to those reserve funds, and the recommendation is to utilize reserve funds to buy down user fees at the expense of indebting us on the new facility. And none of the other member agencies supported that. And I can look at that and I can go, I understand both sides. I do. We just disagree on that. And so if that's for the purpose of having governance, then the board doesn't support that. And the other member agencies, if that's forced upon them, will then go and become their own entity. So it leaves us not with, you know, trying to be difficult or not trying to find a solution. We do believe we're all better together. We look at these numbers and go, city by far had the most to benefit from the regionalized system, given their disproportionately higher use of the system and those dollars being divided amongst everywhere. Those are the concessions the other agencies felt they were given. And so when I do try to summarize, like, okay, hypothetically, what would, you know, get this back to, you know, transitional meetings? Can't speak on behalf of the board because they haven't taken action on that. But I do think 1258, when that dropped, they said that is not consistent with any of the words we're seeing in the correspondence as far as city's desire. Why is that dropping? And then the proposal, if we're making good progress for another year of status quo. And so those two things I saw as the primary driver for why everybody did an abrupt about face on this.
So again, I just think what I'm hearing from the city is wanting a mediator. I think would be helpful, because I think I'm not a mediator, but they would say, the city is interested in more transparency around the finances. What's a way to accomplish that? It may not be like the committee that they suggested.
I will say, that Council President Brian Biggs and I had that discussion 2 years ago, before he moved to Superior Court. And when that happened, we did add, a City of Spokane their council finance person, who's now the City of Spokane's finance person, to the finance committee. I mean, that was what we did to provide that transparency. So I don't think it's transparency in the numbers. I think they want to indebt Shrek and not pay user fees, use the reserves for the user fees. It's not transparency because they have the transparency. And that's what I made sure of 2 years ago. So again, it's a philosophical difference of, I want to have cash to pay for things. I want to have the least amount of debt because debt costs money in the future, versus I want to have debt that is going to get spread out over time, but still will cost more in the future, more over time. And so it's that philosophical difference that I think Shrek is having between Shrek and the city on those reserves.
Well, and one thing I will point out, the way I see it is. what
Again,
would
I'm not
motivate
speaking,
them.
I'm just like hypothetically
Yeah.
saying there could be a different way to get at what the city is looking for or what Shrek is looking for, and a mediator might be able to see that better than me or any of us, like maybe there's a different way to shape it, or a different committee structure or something that would allow for more conversation and thought around the finances. I don't know
It
what
is.
that looks
In
like.
fairness, that's what
But
they
like-
continue to state, right? It's a lack of transparency, but the board looks at it, and because they have been added to the finance committee, they've been at the table for those discussions. And we've had 20 other agencies that have had plenty of clarity to come to a determination. And they've had even more so than any other agency, because they had the benefit of Spokane Fire Department coming in with a lot of comments at that time that there wouldn't be cost savings, that there wouldn't be service improvements. And here's what's happened. They paid less, they saved money. Their call times went down 25 to 28 seconds per month. And Washington Survey and Ratings Bureau came in, an independent third party, and evaluated our dispatch center. And we got the second highest score in the state. And protection classes actually improved for our fire departments. And so from the board's perspective, it's felt like there's been an endless number of questions about more clarity. On the surface, you go, yeah, that makes sense. We should have transparency. The board feels like we do. They've had more so than any other agency, and they feel like they should have enough clarity to make it.
Is there any data we haven't provided them that they have asked for? I mean, I guess that's my question, is they ask for more transparency, but it's whatever they have asked for, we've given them. And so then just asking for clarity becomes a stall tactic until you get what you want, which is more representation and control of the finances. At the end of the day, right now, they're paying user fees to cover their fire dispatch, and all the equipment and everything like that, right? The user fees do that. But right now, they have 33 employees working for the city of Spokane who are providing dispatch services and then the secondary PSAP call taking. Those employees go away. And the salaries and benefits and everything that they are paying for those employees go away. But I'm here to tell you, we're going to employ as many of those people as possible over at Shrek to provide the same service level agreement, and they will get it for less money. But what the mayor wants is to get rid of user fees, and then she gets to save whatever she's spending on the 33 employees plus whatever she was paying for user fees on the fire side. Well, that adds millions of dollars to the city's bottom line. But again, it drains the reserve funds. It costs us all more. And that's really what they want. The reality of it is they could come over with the governance the way it is, with the finances set up the way it is, and they're going to save money. It might not be $8 million. I'm making that number up. It might not be $8 million, but it's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more, because it'll cost Shrek less to provide those services than they are being charged to provide it on their own.
Yeah, and I think to the clarity question.
Sounds like a
right,
great argument to make to a mediator.
but
Because
there's-
that's the point, like.
But they
maybe-
say they don't believe it.
Well, Anyway,
So-
I agree with Commissioner Jordan. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but sometimes folks that are just really ingrained in their positions, sometimes you can find a way to find the common answer, and it may be closer to what you're looking for, out of the agreement.
Commissioner Jordan?
I was just going to add that, to the letter that we've received and to the RCW that's on point as it relates to the sales tax apportionment, there is a possibility that this will be mediated. A certain part of this will be mediated in a sense, right, through Superior Court. And that's a binding process where the county, Shrek, the parties are subject to the order of a court making the decision. The benefit of trying to make an additional effort here and not miss the opportunity of a voluntary mediation is that you continue trying to work to resolve it on mutually agreeable terms before an outside party makes decisions potentially for us. That's just an observation.
I would agree. Gives us till February 6th. Well, thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. We will see what we can make happen between now and February 6th.
Did you need me to stick around for, I can't remember if I was here for 2 topics or just 1.
If you want to stay, the next one is Justin Johnson's going to come in and talk on the opioid updates.
Okay. You need me to.
So if you'd like to, I think it'd be good information.
Okay.
So you can just stay there. Tony, thank you very much for your time. I know it's been
I do appreciate.
a lot. So, and you've been working really, you've been at every meeting. So, since May, when we started this process, to give them the first 3 months, so I appreciate all the effort that you put in to that. Thank you. John, maybe I'll have you moved up here by me since Justin's got a team.
Well, with you guys here, I can't be the smartest person in this room.
I'm not kicking you out. You voluntarily moved.
Thank you again, Cody.
Have a good day.
Okay, you too. Welcome, hello.
Good morning.
We're way behind, so I appreciate you all being here and hanging out with us.
No, I was glad that the sheriff softened you guys up for what is going to be a very dull and not exciting presentation. All right, so we're just going to give a quick update on some of the opioid work that we've been doing, including the existing projects and the OIC, and then we'll give an update on a recent decision by HCA on a portion of our funding. So to open us up, I've got a team here, Jessica Thompson, our supervisor over all the programs, and our OIC representative, of course, Ashley McGee, our manager over the ASO, and then Heather, of course, because anytime opiate dollars are involved, she's going to be dragged in. So Jessica.
Wonderful. So I'm here this morning to give a brief update on how the Opioid Abatement Council is going. And good news, it's going really well. We have, and it's been providing us a great opportunity to share updates as well as receive updates about how opioid settlement funds are being used within our regional service area. All of the participating local governments are represented currently. And as a reminder, that includes Adams County, Berry County, Lincoln County, Stephen County, Spokane and Ponderay counties, as well as the cities of Liberty Lake, Cheney, Spokane, and Spokane Valley. We did have a recent change in the Spokane Valley representation, going from Councilmember Merkel, and now Councilmember Jessica Yeager is representing City of Spokane Valley on our Opioid Abatement Council. We're currently meeting every other month and still getting those updates and making sure that how everyone is using opioid settlement funds is in line with the One Washington MOU. This also provides us with a great opportunity to get statewide updates I attend the statewide meetings, and so currently there are 2 outstanding lawsuits, it sounds like, that we haven't received funding for. They're pending, one of those being the Kroger settlement. So still waiting to hear on kind of when we're gonna get funding for that one. And then I believe there was a potential settlement proposal for the Purdue settlement, but haven't heard if that has been officially finalized and approved at this point in time. That's my very brief update. I have more information if you have any questions though about the opioid settlement funds. OIC.
We may check with the sheriff since he's here, but he probably doesn't have the answer since we're gonna be.
You're gonna ask me for data?
Well, just, because we allocated $200,000 a year from the opioid settlement funds to the sheriff's department.
Right.
And what you're doing with that.
So we have an analyst that we assigned up to the regional, what used to be the regional drug task force, is now an anti-violence and narcotics task force. And so they're focusing their efforts on enforcement for mid to upper level fentanyl and opioid traffickers, things like that. And I think we've also asked him to provide semi-annual updates to you, the board, on kind of where we're at. I don't know whether we've provided that update yet or not, but I can certainly ask about it.
We haven't seen it yet, but
Okay.
no, it would probably be great because as we're, we saw the article in the paper from, as we're watching deaths go up of overdoses.
Yeah.
It might be great timing to get that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, if you aren't aware, I think, one of the reports was that overdose deaths were up almost 10%. But I'd also heard up as much as 50% over last year. I'm not sure which number's accurate. Neither one's really all that acceptable, particularly when you think back to 2018. I think we have 320, 330 in 2024. You go back to 2018 and we didn't have 50. And so, you look over a 5 to now 6 year span, and it's just incredible the rise in opioid deaths that we've had. I don't believe that we have factors in place in this community that are going to, significantly reduce those anytime soon. We haven't really introduced any accountability into the system for people who are using and abusing. They are by and large, I think, of the 300 and plus, they've only ruled 3 of them that were intentional overdoses. The rest are accidental. I don't believe that fentanyl use has subsided at all. Methamphetamine use hasn't subsided at all. And I don't think we're doing things as a community to reduce that. So, I know the article in the paper, it was one of the researchers said, well, I think we lag a couple of years behind the rest of the state. And maybe that's true, but I'm here to tell you, I don't know that we are doing anything in this state right now to reduce that.
Well, and when you think about the state as a whole, though, is lagging behind the nation. It was 5 states total that I think, or I'm sorry, 45 of the 50 states saw reductions in deaths, year over year. And then 5 went the other way. I think Washington, it was 10% more, but Spokane County, we were like 18% more. So so.
Yeah, well, and again, an argument can be made, in those areas where they're reducing deaths, is it because there's more naloxone, Narcan available? I don't know. And I don't know that we're tracking that kind of data in conjunction with the overdose rate. That could be one way to do it, but you're still dealing with the same societal issue that's causing people to overdose. It's just, well, now a lot of them aren't fatal that might have been otherwise. So, and I'm sure Justin and your team, you could probably talk a little bit more about that than I can.
We've mentioned this before. In the last 4 years, we've had 4 facilities for inpatient close, including the only secure withdrawal management on this side of the state. And we received notification that the potentiality of one that's the closest to us out in Wenatchee may also temporarily close its secure portion of that, which means there will be no secure withdrawal management. That's where people can be ITA'd if they're under the influence, the entirety of central to eastern Washington. At a time when we have some of the highest, we're seeing facilities close. The number one issue that they're identifying is lack of behavioral health professionals, but more importantly, the funding needed to support that. The cost has exorbitantly gone up and payers are not paying, from what they're saying, sufficiently enough to maintain the milieu. So This is why Spokane's movement for the Crisis Relief Center is so poignant at a time when other facilities closed. We're the only ones moving forward with opening up a resource and a solution to the challenge we're facing in our community. It just takes time to build out resources.
Absolutely, and I am gonna give an update on phase one of our opioid projects, and funding. The first one being Maddie's Place. If you can recall, we put out an RFP for this, and Maddie's Place was selected for housing support for parents and caregivers of babies with neonatal abstinence syndrome. We did execute that contract in early September in the amount of $600,000, which allowed Maddie's Place to purchase the land next door to their current facility for build out of those housing supports. And so there's no further steps to be taken as it relates to opioid funding, but we do currently continue to fund services through Maddie's Place in their pediatric transitional care facility. And there's been mention of the city possibly supporting them with some of their opioid funds as well.
So as a reminder to the board, we not only gave them money for the building of this transition housing, but we have been ongoing for the last 2 years, providing up to 20% of operational support. That remains, and they have another ask before the state. The state is still not clarified after they did the review that Medicaid can cover these services. They are asking for more data. Now, the feedback from that study the state did, that Marcus Riccielli supported, did indicate that it's beneficial, that the current evidence does indicate that it does support the community, but they they stopped short of providing any additional information because they said insufficient funds were provided for more comprehensive study, including how Medicaid could cover it. We're hoping with this new administration, with HCA, that they'll actually act on it. So they're asking for more money to study for another 2 years, a problem that we have already identified exists. So Spokane County is committed to continuing to support them at the current amount, recognizing that no answer is still given for Medicaid.
And the second project is STARS, the Sobering and Triage Services. And so as similar with Maddie's Place, that also went out to RFP, and we were able to execute a contract amendment back in early November. And through the end of October, early November, and into December, STARS has been working on the initial ramp up of the building transition and renovations to be able to provide services. And in early December, they were able to soft open sobering and triage services. And that's been very successful. Within about a month's time, they've served 81 unique individuals in their sobering center, and 85 to 90% of those individuals have transitioned into further inpatient treatment services, which is wonderful and what we intend to do. And this also is enhancing that triage service and support for individuals to receive same-day OUD, opioid use disorder treatment, as well as transition into further inpatient treatment services.
And that's an important note. So for the 30 days since it opened, we had 81. Since then, almost 100, or actually, let's check, probably over 100. It's a 23-hour and 59-minute. So that means they're there for less than a day, and we're already transitioning them into withdrawal management. So even though it says 5, we actually have 6 beds open right now. So that was at the time we did this misnomer, but they were able to pass them through within a day into treatment, which was more successful than other facilities or other intervention points like the hospital, where they're doing a medical clearance there first, which takes a long time. And it means off of and not in ER. So those individuals would have been served in some other non-behavioral health capacity, were offset or at least diverted. And then because STARS has implemented same-day appointments, they've all received, if they met the criteria or needed it, MAC treatment in conjunction with multi-care. So it's very effective just with the 6 beds that we've had open running.
Commissioner Jordan.
I just want to say that's really exciting to hear about good results happening so fast. So great work. I just wanted to ask when folks go through STARS into inpatient, what are the most common places that they go from there?
Well, currently, because it's part of the project there at STARS, it's in their own withdrawal management facility. The other one would be the Spokane Regional Stabilization Center, SRSC. And then Pioneers, I think to a lesser extent.
Yeah, Pioneer Center East.
The PCE. So we utilize whatever facility is available now. To predominantly, symptomology being seen there, right, is the substance use. There's also behavioral components, so some that also get transitioned to an inpatient behavioral health program or mental health program, like the ENTs or stabilization, if that need is identified. Oftentimes it is. The resolution of the substance use involvement does allow for the mental health to be addressed. So predominantly it's the withdrawal management facility STARS.
Thank you.
And then just for understanding the pilot program with the 6 beds right now is just being used by Spokane Police Department.
There are other ways that people can be referred, but yes, the current trend does lean towards their CAR 50, which operates within the city in conjunction with their fire and police. So the primary individuals being served right now are city individuals referred through their law enforcement or fire.
We were hoping to expand.
So it is allowed for all Spokane
Maybe
County.
that's what you're gonna talk about
Yeah,
next, but-
I think the challenge right now is how do you get those in, and any part of our phase 2, which I'll talk about, is how can we get that more represented across the county? Because if the beds already are being filled daily with the existing need, how can we get it so that there's a greater access for all of Spokane County, including drop-offs by the sheriff's department and by the valley? So looking at an increase in services here in the near future.
And next step for STARS is finalizing the purchase of their building on Cowley, which houses sobering and their withdrawal management services. And that's a partnership with Department of Commerce and plan tentatively for the end of February for purchasing of that building.
They just completed their review, Commerce did, and that's what we've been waiting on. Once they finalize the contract, and our legal team is working on our contract to mirror, that will lock them into a 10-year site location, giving priority Spokane County residents and continuing sobering and withdrawal management services there. Great investment, as we're seeing, and it maintains the service over the next 10 years. And it reduces our costs because now they don't have to pay rent, which then we can deduct from the overall operational side of it. So great investment. I'm working with Pat and with Jeff to ensure that the communication of this, once that's sealed, something that the board, when it comes before you for signature, we can highlight that as well. So as a joint partnership with Commerce. So more to come on that one, but I'm keeping Pat apprised as we move along.
Thank you. So in terms of like the STARS, like you were saying, when someone is brought there to the sobering beds, how the transportation is kind of a barrier maybe for folks outside the central core of the city, county. So what are you thinking, how could that be expanded? Or with the outreach services that are being done in the valley, for instance, through our homeless dollars and other, I don't know if there's some behavioral health dollars, but Frontier's out working to address people who are unhoused. Maybe some of them could benefit from some of the services, but is the issue really like the transportation piece? Like the CAR 50 really just is around the central core.
Correct. And part of that issue, and I talked to the sheriff about this as well, we didn't want cars stacking up if there was no bed placement. So really, we don't want to take law enforcement out of their rotation to go do something when they may not have a bed available. So part of that was looking at ebb and flow, tracking it for a month, seeing what the need is. And the need is already there, are being filled by CAR 50. So if we expand, there is the ability for us to work with law enforcement to let them be able to call ahead and look at bed availability. So we do anticipate law enforcement drop-offs will be another avenue by which people get in.
But currently that's not happening.
It is not happening at a greater extent.
Okay.
Because
But that's the goal, to get to enough beds and capacity so sheriffs can drop off folks if needed.
Correct. Sheriff, fire department, and if we can get them on board with that. And then we also run our housing outreach and stabilization team, host through FBH, also looking at them for transporting. That's our street medicine and behavioral health team that goes out and does multidisciplinary outreach.
There's a lot of street medicine teams out there. There's a lot of outreach happening.
Yeah, we were
So it'd be great if this, could be a resource. Yeah.
And that's one of the tasks we gave our host team, is to work with the Chaz team so that there was coordination. And there has been some discussion of touching base. Again, we didn't want to publicize. The last thing we want is everyone's like, there's no beds. You said there are.
Yes.
And as we're seeing, chock full all the time, which is great. That means at any given time, there's 300 people in a month's time coming through, or 300 services being offered at the location. Is challenging, of course, for law enforcement to take time out of their schedule.
But exciting to see just in the pilot how successful it is being.
Right, I mean, that's huge. 80-90% of people go into treatment.
Yes. It takes a while for us to get started, but once we get chugging along,
Yeah.
we get going. So it's one that we hope to emulate in other areas. And this is something we hope the Crisis Relief Center will also. So part of this is as the 2-year transition to this project, they will be able to even do more, even do some of the medical clearance, so we can actually offset more from the hospitals. So a lot bigger planning for that, which I'll let Senior Director Barber share at a future point. But yeah, really excited about that.
Next slide, please. The next update pertains to the city of Spokane Valley and in our local agreement that we're working on securing with them their council approved opioid funds to go towards the capital investment and operational expenses of our crisis relief and sobering center. Not a huge amount of funding, but about 40,000 expected initially, and then a subsequent 20,000 annually afterwards. We're currently awaiting that interlocal agreement from the city of Spokane Valley, and once that's reviewed, we'll bring that back before the board.
And really appreciate Matt and his team's work and help on that, a lot of communication. So kind of a hurry up and wait situation at times. Next slide. And next slide. Excellent. So for 2025, I am going to be putting forward phase 2, or what I'm calling phase 2 for our opioid projects and priorities. So we have the existing projects that are in place. In your package, you will also see a draft budget. Heather's here she has already made some adjustments to that as things have changed. So I actually projected cumulative costs with existing projects and then proposed projects to give you an idea of what would be remaining. Now in there, we also got the information from Heather on admin costs, as well as putting Spokane Valley's pot of money in. Those are all projections, and the admin costs I did with the cumulative amounts deducted, give you a worst case scenario. If we were to expend all of it and all of the admin, this is what you'd be left with. Recognizing it's encumbered, but the actuals are coming in much less. And Heather made a note of this. I don't know if you want to share on that it actually was a little bit more aggressive for the admin amounts.
Where we added the Spokane Valley's money and it increased our admin costs, so the admin will be a little bit less.
So you'll see 2 lines in there. One will say 2024 projects and then cumulative with 2025 projects. So before I wanted to get in, you can refer to that as we talk about what these projects could look like.
I just want to, so the regional opioid council that was discussed, those have representatives from surrounding counties as
Correct.
well. So did any of their money, their monies that they were awarded, did any of those go into these projects that we've just discussed? But with like Maddie's Place, did any of the surrounding counties go there? Did any of them go to STARS? Was it a substantial amount?
So all of them, except for Spokane City, were not given a substantial amount of opioid dollars.
Okay.
So that was one of the challenges identified. No other provider, other municipality or region identified our project except for Spokane Valley, and that they wanted to join our Crisis Relief and Sobering Center project. And then the city potentially, they still haven't issued out what they're going to use for their funds, but I've gotten some indication, possibly Maddie's Place and possibly other projects we're involved in, but they haven't confirmed.
Okay, but like Stevens County, Ferry County, all that, they received dollars, but they're a part of our opioid council, but they're keeping their funds within their boundaries then?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
utilizing them for other things. I know Ferry, Stevens, and Ponderay are represented by the Tri-County Health District, and
Yep.
right now they're in the RFP process of
Okay.
selecting contractors, and they're focusing a lot on prevention in the rural counties. Lots of purchasing of Narcan, maybe doing some education in schools. I think Lincoln County is focused on that, but nothing related to our projects.
Okay.
And they receive very small amounts.
Okay, I wasn't sure if maybe they were looking at STARS, thinking that's a facility that they could utilize. I know there's travel distance, there's
Yeah.
geographical differences, but the service of what, wasn't sure if maybe that was something they were eyeing of, if we put dollars in there, we could utilize the facility or something, cause I don't know if they have I assume they don't have anything of that scale in their communities, but so, okay.
No, they don't, and they have expressed the desire to want to use the facilities, but their amounts, you're talking like $5,000. Wouldn't even, it would cost, let alone to get their interlocal agreement for their attorneys to do, would cut down on their overall amount.
Okay.
So I think they're still going to use it.
Uh-huh.
Recognize Spokane County has been very supportive of many, many years, providing that opportunity to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So for 2025, we're proposing two other initiatives for our phase two. These both will just key off of existing services. So the goal, as we've discussed in the previous priorities and now, really is how can we look at gaps in the system and build on other things so that we're maximizing the use of our funds and we're not duplicating or supplanting funds that already exist. So one of those really has been a conversation out of the many different groups we worked with, law enforcement, first responders, is we need to have more availability for OUD or MAT treatment services. That's medication assisted treatment for those that are experiencing opioid use disorder or really any other substance use disorder. Currently, SRHD operates on a very unique schedule, specific shifts that allow for individuals to come in, usually during the day, and then very limited capacity for going out in the community or weekends. We think we can expand that. And I know they've expressed that they actually turn away or have turned away people in the past on those off hours. They're not sure exactly how many, but it's somewhere between 20 to 30 individuals may have been turned away on a monthly basis based on the times and availability. If we expand those out, that could be 20 or 30 additional people that are diverted away from involvement with law enforcement, having an overdose, or going to the ED when one of those do come up because they didn't get a medication or they had to wait till the next morning. By expanding it in to allow for walk-ins, SRHD, which is already in place, already has contracts with all the Medicaid, they can transition them immediately into a covered service, so we don't have to pay for ongoing care. That's something that they already have and can bill Medicaid. So we maximize sustainability long-term. We get individuals in the moment it's needed, and we allow another resource for law enforcement. And this can be tied into other services being provided. So our Sobering Center with STARS, our Crisis Relief Center coming on board, SRSC, all can refer, including the jail, upon release for walk-in to get their MAT treatment if they didn't get it or didn't have time. They can get it as a diversion from crisis relief. Again, allows more connectivity in the community because oftentimes we think, oh, person didn't get a service because they didn't get enrolled. Well, what about those that missed a dose and need that dose to prevent a potential overdose or seeking out other drugs? This can provide that opportunity. So we're recommending that be added to our priority list to expand service delivery. Current cost for that is potentially up to $650,000. We're exploring options and how we can meet that, but that's one of the areas I would advise the board allow us to expand to begin providing that service in an expanded way to the community. And in light of the numbers, I think it only highlights we need this service available. Should not be an individual who is identified as overdose community and potentially at a risk for lethality. You should never have said they didn't make the cutoff for an 8 p.m. Opening. That shouldn't be the reason. And again, really just using existing. SRHD has expressed an openness to exploring this with us. The second thing, oh yes.
It's an ignorant question, I get it, maybe. So we get 80 to 90% of these people into medicated assisted treatment, right? And is that short term while they get them medically stabilized and then they move into either intensive outpatient treatment or inpatient treatment, or is the MAT, is that the inpatient treatment?
No, it's that's why we're recommending SRHD because they have an integrated program already. It's about getting them into the entirety of the program. All MAT treatment should be at the part of an ongoing outpatient and potential inpatient if need be. SRHD does that with their individuals. The moment they're seen and assessed, it's for the entirety of the services within their array.
Do you have any idea how many people transition from the MAT to SRHD services? And you might not know, I'm probably asking questions you didn't come prepared. This is just for my own curiosity.
So for those that come into the treatment, I had this initial conversation with them. It sounds like anywhere from 80 to 90% end up continuing with treatment there with SRHD.
Okay, perfect. So really high success rates on both sides.
Well, definitely,
We're maybe losing 15% of the people. That's awesome.
high success rates for getting them enrolled. Successful outcomes, they didn't give me that data. So I'm not sure on those, but the current national trend for those is somewhere near like 60 to 70%. Still wildly more successful than those that
Yeah.
don't.
Absolutely. Yeah, I am not personally discouraged by a 60 to 70% success rate. That's actually pretty incredible.
And then the second initiative that we're recommending is expansion of stars. Like discussing it, it's shown itself to be very popular in the last month and definitely a worthwhile resource. And again, in light of the numbers we're seeing, we need this availability for an option for law enforcement, the community, and from hospitals to allow for treatment to occur. And then for individuals to be enrolled in services. Oftentimes that drop-off point for that 23-hour to 48-hour window is a key indicator for outcome success for individuals. If they're kept into treatment and they stay, that's another up to 14 days of treatment. We've just extended what would have been only 48 hours to 14 days. It's absolute necessity for addressing and combating the opioid crisis we're seeing. So recommend the board provide us the direction to allow for conversation on this, to continue existing services at the current rate. We would need another 250, so we wouldn't see a disruption. There is state dollars, but as we'll discuss in the next slides, I want to maintain the existing and potential expansion. So we're requesting for current capacity 250, for greater expansion, we're looking at a much higher amount. I don't have that estimates for you now, but if we're given the authority to move forward with this, we'll provide more information for expanded services in the future.
And Justin, just to confirm for the board's understanding, both the MAT expansion for the hours and the additional beds, those would be annual ongoing costs as part of our opioid funds.
Correct. Unless I could scrape some state dollars, it would be predominantly the opioid dollars.
And we have enough funding to do that.
Well, in your budget, I did give a cost estimate based on worst case scenarios. At the rate of up to $400,000 for the SRHD and $250 to $350 for the stars, we would have plenty plus additional. As the years go on, we actually accumulate a lot more funds, and this is without the next two settlements even being decided. So that's, again, rough estimates based on if we hit the projected amounts. I think our actuals will come in much less. We're seeing that currently. And we're able to offset some of the costs with our SABG funds through the state contract. But at the worst case scenario, yes. Now, any further expansion, that would be another discussion to have, because I don't have those numbers yet for you.
Commissioner Jordan.
I just wanted to say, I think this sounds like a really great direction. I appreciate all of your team's work on it. I trust that you are always looking for ways to incorporate state dollars if at all possible. So appreciate the way that you seek to braid funding sources. And one of the things I appreciate as well is just the thought to connect with law enforcement in these strategies and give first responders more tools out there. So I think it sounds great.
The budget that Justice referred to that his team and Heather are working on shows that we'll be receiving annually about $1.4 to $1.56 million each year from kind of known opioid dollars coming in. So sufficient to be able to cover those programs.
And with the Crisis Relief Center, the allotment of $5 million, since that won't be actualized immediately, they're still going to see more in the actual offers until that actually is spent down over the building in the next 2 years. So you'll see an increase and then a decrease all at once. So at any given time, it's about timing really on the use and when we implement. Either way, there would be sufficient funds to continue these projects.
So I guess the only question for me is, these are all kind of issues that we're dealing with after the fact. So kind of what is, I know the sheriff's office is kind of our prevention, part of our prevention strategy. The schools, are they getting the programs into the schools to educate? Because that was a state.
Yes.
issue, so I don't know. I haven't heard anything about how that's working, or have they gotten it, or they're still developing the program to educate in the schools.
Yeah, they did pass a bill, in the last legislature, directing schools to provide that education as part of it. And there looks to be another bill that expands that this year as well, to include behavioral health, not just substance use, but all of it. The challenge being with the budget shortfall this next year, the question the schools put forward is what monies, because they thought they'd have more money. I think the question really is feasibility would depend on how much the state allocates in funding for that. But it is a mandate for the schools to incorporate it in training. Now, it is not as robust as our program, the SW, because treatment as well as intervention occurs. That part was never included, it's just education. So schools are still partnering with us to do handoffs for individuals as part of that. And we're working closely with them for partnership and collaboration on that. I think what I want to highlight about these proposed projects is what you're seeing is that a lot of the work is after the fact, but there is a lot of prevention in this. SRHD does a lot of community engagement. The goal there is really deflection from law enforcement. We don't want them involved in that. And even though they may already be involved in drugs, we're preventing them for further escalation of that, including with STARS as well. So there is a prevention component, but you're right, up to the upstream section where before anyone even uses drugs, we are doing quite a bit. We do have a part of that with our SABG that we're looking to expand this next year. The challenge being we're shouldering quite a bit of this on our own, and we've got to get the managed care companies to also do prevention for Medicaid individuals. That is not as cohesive as I would like. Really, they can do it individually, and they do for their own members. So it's been a challenge to get them to join with this in uniformity.
So what does that look like in the schools then? Sort of educating kids about drugs, about the dangers. I mean, as somebody who went through, the grade school in the early 90s, it was DARE. I mean, DARE has gone away sort of in its form at that time. So what does that look like today then?
Well, so under the statute there, it allowed the schools to be able to define the programming under certain parameters on their own. So there is one we presented to the board 2 years ago, BOTBIN, which is a national one that have showed evidence. It departs from DARE, signing a pledge not to use drugs and all that. So it's not the 80s reimagined. It incorporates more within the context of health and wellness within the school. However, we don't know because the schools haven't had to produce what type of education they've had to do are implementing yet.
Okay.
So
do you know sort of what's the plan or sort of the concept of who delivers that message? DARE, it was a deputy or an officer, depending on where you were. Any idea? I mean, is it the teacher, just those kids' primary teacher? Is it a counselor? Is it the school nurse? I mean, any idea sort of who delivers the message?
when the bill was being passed, they were hoping that it would be professionals coming in as hired by the schools to do that.
Okay.
Since then, the money is the issue. So inevitably, I think it'll end up being some sort of wellness teacher doing that.
Okay.
As kind of like that's all they have available. I think best practice is to have a professional do that.
Okay.
Believe, and I only know this through my efforts on the SAFE board. We used to go into different school districts providing that, but I know Meade School District has an individual doing that work specifically. I don't know about any of the other ones, but I do know Meade specifically does have an employee that is doing some of that.
Okay.
Is there any way to incorporate the resource officers?
Well, it's
into it
interesting
if they
you
have
say that. DARE has been reformed in the last couple of years, and to where, and I've actually have one of my undersheriffs looking into how we might go ahead and implement the new DARE program countywide. It has less to do with, pledging not to use drugs, but has more to do about using deputies to teach curriculum about building character, standing up to bullying, standing up to people who might want to persuade you to use drugs, how to, again, maybe build some emotional strength and well-being so you don't end up being involved with those kind of groups. So it is back nationwide, and I do have my folks looking into what that might take to get our school resource deputies trained in that and how to implement it countywide. So.
being able to just interact with a law enforcement official,
It's
that's
a
not,
big- it's a
that's
big
not a
deal.
bad thing.
It's a
I
great
mean, just, that's great. Yeah.
And you may want to talk to Justin and Ashley about what that other program looked like.
Yeah.
Just to see, not that we would be able to do that, but I mean, just to know what that was, because that was brought to me by one of the commissioners in Yakima County, because they were gonna use it and they were really excited about it.
What was the name of the program?
And some of those components are similar to what you're describing.
Yeah, so Yakima did incorporate their law enforcement.
And do you know what age or what grade is that kind of targeted at?
It was more middle school, but primarily high school.
Oh.
So end of middle school into high school. is
Oh,
really
okay,
the
so-
target age
okay.
population that's tested
Okay.
and evidence based in.
I envision that the schools won't want to create something from scratch, knowing that it'll cost money. Buffin is already a,
Can you spell that? What are you saying?
BOTVIN.
BOTVIN? Not in.
Yakima County passed resolution to use their opiate dollars for that across their schools. Excellent. If there's no other questions on opiate or opiate dollars, sure Heather will give an update once we get more funds. But I assume I've got approval to move forward with these initiatives to begin exploring and
Yes,
preparing briefs.
Amber. Head nod.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
I think it's really important. I want to get those other beds opened up as soon as we can. So thanks for all your hard work, Dan.
Thank you, Heather. And then last but certainly not least, next slide. Our ASO budget. So in your package, you'll see a letter that we received from HCA back in December. This was not something we were made aware of till we received the letter. Essentially, HCA is implementing a clause in their contract, pulling back a certain amount of funds. They're doing this in light of the current budget shortfalls and the current governor's direction to reduce by 6% across the board. Now, the decision in December was made by the previous administration in advance of the new administration. The new administration is still evaluating. But either way, HCA is recalling back a certain amount of funds and then deciding what to do next. I believe their intention is saying if we pull back money now, a certain amount that we know is available, then we won't have to make cuts later or make any changes to our allocation. They'll be able to maybe do a one and done deal. Again, that's entirely determined upon the legislature and the current administration. So in there, they made a determination to pull back a certain amount of funds from contract amount and allocation from state fiscal year 2025, which actually began in June 30th of 2024. So we're on the state fiscal year and that cycle had an impact. So bear with me here between calendar year, state fiscal year, and federal year. So those amounts were determined upon what we had available then, even though they approved us to use funds and we already expended those funds for then 6 months and then allocated them out in the January contract. So it will change how we make some determinations, but will not affect, I want to be clear on this, any of the amounts that the board have already approved. It's part of the contract for the January. We are and have money available. So good news there. You don't have to come back and re-listen to all of those. We were able to mitigate them. Spokane was able to reach out to HCA, next slide, in December, and we were able to have the first meeting across the state with HCA, and we were able to negotiate a change in those funds. So you also see in your slide, the state identified current, this is a small list, but a set of provisos and funding. Now, this doesn't include all of them. This is just 1/3 of all of our provisos, but the state identified a certain amount, which they said we had available in allocation in June. The actuals are actually much different, but this is what they said in June, what they wanted return. We submitted a request saying, no, can we negotiate what those amounts are based on our own needs and uses? And that's what I'll talk about here. That negotiation was very successful. Spokane was able to convince them ahead of the other ASOs, which gave the other ASOs subsequent time to be able to negotiate as well. So I think 3 other ones were able to talk with the state, and they got similar deals. So thankfully Spokane was able to go ahead and get the best deal. So what does this actually look like? So the state requested up to $9.8 million back. Now, that seems like a scary number, but it isn't as bad as it sounds. And it's quite a bit of money, but most of it is in provisos that were either stipulated by the legislature to be used for a specific area, which we couldn't, or funds that we've been carrying over since the BHO era that we have not used, but we've been keeping track of, knowing that they were going to pull it back anyways. So they were funds that we weren't able to have. One of those, for example, CJTA. That funds we were notified when the BHO transitioned to the ASO, any remaining funds at that time were going to be recalled by the CGATA statewide panel. They just never followed through with it at the time. So we carried them, all the interest accrued, and we kept it in the account knowing, and that is one of the funds that they ended up identifying to be clawed back. Again, we had already prepared, never allocated that amount out in our budgeting forecast, so it didn't affect anything in the way that we do it. So no services under CGATA will be affected. We need more money there. That's why we didn't touch it, knowing that we didn't want to put something in there that couldn't be made sustainable. So that's one thing that we identified. Another one is some of the crisis team expansion. When we built our crisis teams and expanded them out, we expanded them out pretty significantly. But at the time, the state thought we would need ramp up for just state dollars. I immediately incorporated the Medicaid side of it, like I do. And they ended up paying a larger portion of that. So it offset the cost the state thought we were gonna need to ramp up with our state dollars. That ended up just being carried over, but we couldn't use it for anything but that expanded youth program. But I already had Medicaid paid for it. It's already allocated, it's already negotiated. So they clawed back a portion of those funds that inevitably we knew were gonna go back because they wouldn't let us spend it on any other area because they're limited. But the money is already there for Medicaid. So sustainable, ongoing, the teams are built out. We even did an expansion as part of our sale transition for a dispatch. A lot of terminology there, but even with that expansion and the ramp up costs we gave them, the money we still pulled a lot from Medicaid will not impact that expansion or service delivery. Again, I always try to forecast 2 years in advance so that sustainability is there in case the state pulls back money. So that's what you'll see we negotiated. One of the areas we negotiated down was the flexible funding. That's the GFS that lets us shift amongst the different priorities. We asked for more money back on that. They asked for a return of 3 million. We only asked for to give 1 million back. But because I have been effective in finding other funds to support it, we actually anticipate at the time the state allocates out for the July 1 for state fiscal year 2026, 2027, because we'll just 2026, we'll not have spent out those funds. So we'll still be faced with the same thing. We'll be over our reserve. So 2 areas that we'll be asking in conjunction with this is essentially letting us keep more in a reserve that protects us and allows us to be able to forecast in a 2-year period. That just makes sense. You can't really forecast with a minimum reserve of 2 million where ebb and flow doesn't allow us much. It's just more for emergencies. And then we're also asking them to let us do more allocation to admin. Currently, we're capped at 5% for direct and then indirect 10%, or indirect 5%, direct 10%. We aren't able to cover all of our salaries in the ASO, which is limiting our staffing. We're wanting them to expand it out. We have a lot of programs and not a lot of support for those. So that should let us be able to keep more or spend more of the reserve, allowing for greater allocation. However, the state is still pushing forward with the clause allowing them to recoup. What I'm letting you know is they're asking for 9.8. We found 9.8, which will not harm or take away from any of our existing. And we are going to proceed with that based on the contract requirement. I did request an extension. You'll see that they want us to pay it back by February 18th. I asked them to extend it out to March 31st. Here's why. Although I do think they have the authority, legally, our attorneys tell us, yes, they do. There is some conversation that this was enacted under the previous administration, that the governor currently isn't and was not directing this. And they have a new HCA director, Marianne Lindeblad, who also did not make this determination back when this occurred. So the question is, will the administration change, lower, reduce, or will the legislature make a change? So we're asking for an extension just to be able to evaluate. But we do anticipate that they'll move forward with some clawback. Maybe it'll be less. But I can tell you, worst case at the 9.8, we were able to negotiate with no harm to our funding or programming as it stands now, or the future forecasting for expansion of programs that we have stipulated.
Say thank you to you and your team. I mean, that's huge and is amazing because of, I mean, I think we're seeing it across the board everywhere that the state is, you know, is overspent in prior years and are gonna have to figure out what to do. So
Shout out to Laura Schultz, our fiscal operations manager. She truly has been the one tracking this for the last couple of years, and the ebb and flow has really been under her purview. So with her foresight on this, it's protected us from that. You know, we always keep that reserve in the mental sales tax for liability, and we've never had to actually touch that because of the ability for us to manage risk with the state funds alone.
thank you.
We'll let you know as this comes forward. But again, I just got notified of the extension, so we have till March 31st to repay it back, which will give us some time with the current workday anyways, to cut a check and send it out. So
Right.
I was very thankful for that.
Yes. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate you coming to give us the updates and yes, and you got the head nods to move forward. with
Excellent.
Putting
Appreciate
together.
it. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Glad to see.
I'll get you a report.
Okay. Okay, I do know that we have George Dahl coming to talk to us, but we are delaying that for 2 weeks. So they'll come back and talk to us in 2 weeks. So do not have that on our agenda, which is probably, yes, which, you know, since we're over our agenda. We do have an executive session.
We have one. We have two more, but we'll do those tomorrow. Commissioner French.
Okay, and how long do we think those tomorrow will take? Just to,
Well, one is kind of two, which could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and one is 10 minutes.
okay,
40 to 70 minutes.
so we should be able to, if I can keep everybody on track in the morning, we can do those tomorrow morning. Okay, and then now, what would you like to go into executive session for?
Any message you want to do this later?
Oh, any,
Wait till tomorrow.
yes, any miscellaneous from an ad? Okay, not seeing any miscellaneous, we'll just go.
So we've got one item under acquisition lease of real estate, RCW 4230-110-1B. That would be the board. Matt Folsom, myself, Kyle Tuig, and don't know if he's going to possibly Deb Geiger, and then Jeff Morse.
Okay, and how long do we think?
10 minutes, most, at most.
And
No action.
no action. So it is 10:44. We're gonna go into executive session for about 10 minutes. For the purpose stated with the people in attendance, no action is anticipated. So after that executive session, we will adjourn for the day. And then we'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you all very much.